So I'm pleased to introduce this next panel, at least the moderator, and Melissa is one of our fellow board members, so I'm extra pleased to introduce her. Melissa King is Vice President of MLS Services at Stellar MLS, which is Florida's largest MLS. Stellar MLS offers an impressive product lineup to their customers, and that is one of Melissa's key focus areas. She loves creating partnerships with vendors who are like-minded about moving the concept of MLS forward. Melissa leads product management and software development teams at Stellar and is currently pursuing her mini MBA certification through Rollins College, and as I said, serves on the RESO board of directors. So welcome, Melissa, and she'll introduce the panel.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning. I'm going to give a very, very brief background to why we are here. Last year, Stellar MLS, at the time it was My Florida Regional MLS, went through a database conversion to bring our native database in compliance with the RESO data dictionary versus doing it through a translation, which is how we had previously been doing it. And so during that process and after that process, we have had the pleasure and I've had the privilege to work with the panelists that I am about to introduce you to. So please help me to introduce Amy Gorce on stage. So Amy leads the development team for CoreLogic Real Estate Solutions. And she's got over 20 years of technology experience in the real estate industry. So next I will introduce Andrew Sheh. So Andrew is the CTO of Remine. He has a background in architecting and developing data analytics platforms and software to align data analysis techniques and data science principles to real-world business challenges. Thank you, Andrew. Next I have Kristin Youngk. So Kristin is with Bridge Interactive Group. She is the senior program manager there. And so I've known Kristin now for a few years. We actually met on my first panel where I almost passed out. So thank you, Kristin. And lastly, we have Warren Bowley. So Warren leads the dev team for Michael Saunders and Company. So they are a brokerage within our MLS. They have over 25 offices and over 700 agents. I have worked very closely with Warren over the last few years for any major changes that we would be making. We tend to run through him and his group to take a look at and make sure that we're aligning with what our brokerage community needs. So thank you, Warren. And I'm going to see if I can get this off without making a lot of noise. All right.
We did it.
So I want to start off by asking a couple of you, and Andrew, I'm sorry, I'm going to leave you out of this one. But before we really get into the results that we have experienced since this data dictionary conversion, I just wanted to see if there was anything anyone wanted to share about the process of going through it. Amy, we'll start with you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll start. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, it sounds like it's on. I think the process of doing a data dictionary conversion isn't for the faint of heart, and sort of before I say that, I'll say I don't lead development at CoreLogic. I lead business development at CoreLogic. I saw all of the engineers that work for CoreLogic in the room go, she's bossy enough already without her actually being our boss. So I lead business development at CoreLogic, but it includes products like Trestle that perform data dictionary machinations, right? And so when we work with customers who say they want to do a data dictionary conversion, I think the most important thing to do up front is help everyone get buy-in about what that means. I think for Melissa, and I know Kristin and a lot of the folks at CoreLogic, it was a year-long commitment. And you have to understand up front, and I think, Melissa, you mentioned this on our call, kind of what the impacts to your end users will be, right? Because it's not without change. So I think from my perspective, watching now, I think CoreLogic's done half dozen or more of these. It's kind of doing a level set up front to understand who the team is, what the commitment is, because it's not just time on a CoreLogic staffer's part, it's time on the MLS's part, it's time on every vendor downstream, on every broker downstream. And while I think at the end it's a success story and it's worthwhile, having that commitment up front ensures that it's not a super negative experience.
Yeah.
for everybody.
I couldn't agree more. I would say if I had it all to do over again, I absolutely 100% would. I would do it differently,
Yeah.
but I would do it again. It
And
was
we
worth it
learn
for
a
us.
lot every time we do them too, obviously. And so for us internally, it's even identifying our subject matter experts and making sure that just because they don't manage that account or don't work on that account, that we're pulling those resources in so everybody doesn't have to relearn.
Thank you, Amy. Kristin.
I would say one thing that you did really well in the transition was just really excellent project management on the part of your whole team. I think, touching on what Amy said, when you're moving that many vendors along, both providing services to you and then the vendors who are providing services to your brokers, it's really critical that you're nailing those dates and handing that information out accurately and that there's not a bunch of shifting along the way. And so I really want to tip my cap to you guys for doing a really excellent job on that part.
Thank you. So that was something that was really important to us. We had one delay, so this was not perfectly executed. We had an original launch date actually, and we decided that we needed to push that, I believe, by a couple of weeks. But the communication was key in doing so and making sure everyone knew, and in a lot of instances, picking up the phone and making calls to the people that would be impacted by that delay. So I kudos to the project management team that worked on it. Thank you. And so Warren, from a brokerage and developer perspective.
Well, as a data consumer, I'm on the other end of it. So I get a notification from you that says, hey, by the way, we're switching to a standardized data format. So for me, what does that mean? They send out a translation document that says, here's what you're currently getting. So this is the non-data dictionary compliant method you're getting it, the field names and everything, and here's how we're transitioning it to the data dictionary model. So from that perspective, I can plan ahead and say, okay, here's where I need to modify all of my processes to accommodate this new thing. But going forward, I'm guaranteed that I'm going to get the same consistent data every time. And if we decide to join a different MLS that's data dictionary compliant, I don't have to worry about trying to reconcile all these different fields. It's always going to be the same. So the biggest key for me was having the documentation up front, knowing how it was going to change.
So I think that that's probably, from the MLS perspective, at least for our MLS, that was the biggest concern, is how it was going to be impactful to our brokerage community. And so if you had to do it all over again, would you?
Absolutely. I know now that if my brokerage decides to go to a conference or they see a great product, if that vendor is already using a data dictionary compliant MLS provider, I don't have to worry about, them saying, well, it's going to be a $5,000 setup fee or it's going to take us 6 weeks to get the product to you. I know it's going to work out the door.
So I want to shift gears just a little bit and really dig into the focus of why we're up here, and it is to talk about the successes that we have experienced in these partnerships post-conversion. And so Andrew, I would like to start with you. One of our most recent launches was with Remine, and could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we've, Remine's onboarded over about 50 MLSs in the past year, and the first step to onboarding with Remine is basically taking your MLS data and mapping it. In our system, we've always kind of naturally tended to map our MLS data to RESO standards, so helping the MLSs do so. With Stellar's kind of progress, we're already getting ahead of that, and with the vendors helping them kind of accelerate that path, we actually saw crazy acceleration in terms of our onboarding. So I think we literally got credentials from you on a Thursday, and then on Tuesday, we had all the data mapped for Stellar MLS, and we're up and live in a couple days after that. So it was pretty seamless, and I think that it kind of just shows the success of how vendors can quickly adopt and predict where MLSs are going with their data, and it just kind of shows success in the effort that's put up front to get the data mapped and kind of like helping downstream.
So I remember getting the email from Barbara, the project manager at Remine that we worked with, and it was on, I had released credentials to them on the 4th of April, and on the 9th I received an email saying, it's ready for review. And I immediately wrote her back and I was like, by any chance, do you think this is a result of our data dictionary conversion? Because I was so eager. After hearing so long about why this is important, right? We're gonna break down the barriers of entry into our industry for technology vendors and everything. So I wanted a success story so bad, and man, we got one with that launch. It was huge and timely, and when we went in to review the mapping that had been done, I think it was maybe 6 fields that we reviewed, and only 4 of them needed some minor tweaking, and that was it. And we were launched within 30 days. So yeah, great story there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kristin.
Yeah, so we saw benefits on several different fronts. At Zillow Group as a whole, we translate all of our data coming in to the data dictionary format. So getting a feed from a database that's already in native data dictionary format that we can trust obviously really streamlined our data mapping and ingestion initial processes. For the Bridge API, I would say that really increased our confidence in the quality of the Stellar MLS data that we're putting out to consumers. The Bridge API is our RESO Platinum certified data distribution web API program that is available to any Stellar MLS data consumers, if you happen to know anyone in the audience. And so knowing that your field is data dictionary, we know that we're not losing data in translation when we're passing it back out, and developers are already familiar with all the fields when they're transferring from RETs. I'd say finally, listing input is where I'm really most excited about the benefits that we've reaped. So for our Bridge listing input product, our efforts with you that requires RETs update, so we're pushing data back into their system. So her being native data dictionary really definitely increases my confidence in our reverse mappings. I know that we're not going from local to data dictionary format back into local. We're not going to lose any data there. You know, that's been a big hurdle for a lot of update applications over the years, something I've talked about on RESO panels for 5 or 6 years now, so thank you for making my RESO experience come full circle here. And so with listing input, you know, definitely decreased errors and those sorts of translation oddities that you might get. Obviously streamlined our reverse mapping times. And then finally, from a user perspective, I would say it really decreases the amount of time it might take a user to enter a listing, because if you're using a product like Listing Input to send data to multiple sources, maybe another MLS, maybe a broker back office system, because we have such confidence in the Stellar MLS data dictionary definitions of their fields, we can feel really confident saying, you only need to enter this field once, and we can, with confidence again, push it back out to 3 or 4 different sources without worrying about any data loss in translation.
So you mentioned a few times lost in translation, which is actually something that I was considering naming this panel, but I felt like it would need an explanation behind it, so then I felt like it definitely wasn't the right name. But that was something we experienced back in like the Data Dictionary 1.3, I think is when we very first did the translation using Bridge, who's they've been a great partner as our RETS vendor. I did not do that translation, so I remember in 1.4 when I went behind and did it, there were so many changes based on how someone within my organization had previously mapped it for that translation. And so just with those differences within my organization, it's terrifying. So when we were looking at doing it again, we're like, why are we doing this? We could, take the leap and do an entire database conversion, which I do understand. We did have the luxury of doing as a large MLS, and not everyone would necessarily have that luxury. But yeah, the losing information in translation is very real, and it is something that we did just within our organization. So anyone who is using any other tool with Bridge API or Trust or MLS Grid, I would just very much encourage be very involved in that translation. I'm sure everyone is, but it was a full-time job for one of our staff people for a couple of months to work with the CoreLogic project manager every single day, hours every day, making sure that we had our mapping perfect for this. So, Amy, is there any success stories that you want to share?
I think it's similar to my colleagues here on stage, right? Once we put in the work up front, which benefited everyone, then we were able to ingest and map trestle data in hours, not days, not weeks, which was a big benefit. I think the other benefit I've seen from Stellar overall, just having that data dictionary, is as you all continue to grow and merge in, other smaller organizations that have some sort of data dictionary solution. For you all, the benefit is, right, that mapping's done. So you can look at data that's been mapped either through Trestle or another solution and ingest it much easier into your solution. So it's been supportive of your growth, which I think if you're looking for reasons to do a data dictionary conversion, I think supporting the growth, supporting adding, more data to your solution, either through geographic growth or data shares, if that's the best you can do, is one of the reasons.
So I agree. I think it was an unintended consequence of the conversion when we did it. But yeah, looking forward, because we are trying to grow as a regional MLS, and so anyone who's already participating in Trestle, especially, it makes it a lot easier. Half the work's already done up front, if not more than half.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about lost in translation is worth discussion because obviously with Trestle, we map the same way every time, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very consistent experience across Trestle markets, but I did hear that feedback, I think at Inman Connect, that like there's still a little bit of a disconnect maybe between Bridge and Trestle and Grid, for example. And so it's worth a discussion about where we're different. Like our differentiator shouldn't be how we map data, right? Like data is data. And so from our perspective, we provide the maps back to the client. They can provide them out to whoever they want, as a way to try to help facilitate ensuring we're providing the same experience, whether you're using the Bridge tool, the Grid tool, or Trestle.
Warren, is there anything in addition to this that you want to share about post-conversion life?
As a data consumer, it's more long-term from my perspective. So now I know that I've got a foundation to work on, and when the web API comes in, I know that I'm still going to get the same data elements. It's just a different way of getting it from the server. When we're looking for new people to come on board, when we switch to the web API, they don't have to worry about librets or how to query the server. I can give them a document that says, this is the database, it's always going to be this way. If my broker decides to join another MLS, I don't have rework trying to merge data. So long-term for us, it's easier to plan ahead and cut down on development time, knowing that that standard's there and it's not going to change.
All right, thank you. So obviously, Amy mentioned earlier, not everyone is going to be in a position to be able to go through a full-blown database conversion. The amount of time and work and money that can cost is it's large. So we talked a little bit about Trestle and about Bridge API, but I just want to make sure that everyone understands what the other options are to be able to still provide a data dictionary compliant data feed. So Amy and Kristin, is there anything?
Yeah, like Kristin mentioned with Bridge API, Trestle's a platinum compliant data dictionary and web API solutions tool. We have 118 markets, I think today, about 90 of them fully kind of onboarded with data available. And what we've seen is vendors seeing a lot of benefit from the data dictionary. I think that's been well realized at this point, kind of regardless of the transport. The data dictionary, I think the Homes.com boys and Cloud CMA guys are sort of well known for the benefits, but we've seen it, even at the IDX provider, even at a regional brokerage level, just the efficiencies that are gained there. I think the web API is still getting its wings, right? It's a transport protocol, requires a little more engineering to switch from RETs, but ultimately creates a lot of efficiency as well. So I've explained it like a 3-lane highway, like we're all in the RETs lane right now, and you're going to move to the data dictionary RETs lane next, right? And then ultimately to the web API. And that seems to be the right path for folks. So don't be intimidated when you hear we'd like you to use our RESO web API. Kind of think of it as, as if you're probably already absorbing a data dictionary feed today in at least one market. And it's not a kind of too much of a stretch to move to the web API from there when you're ready.
All right. Thank you.
Sure, just extemporaneously, a lot of what Amy just said. I think, looking towards vendors looking to convert to an API solution. I've spoken to some friends in the industry back on the other side where I used to be in your shoes. I ran a data ingestion service at a large IDX vendor for several years. And so I know that, it's a huge change to your processes. You've already got, 500 RETS feeds running right now. And to stop everything you're doing to convert to an API or a data dictionary feed is pretty significant. But speaking to some friends in the industry who've made the leap, the first switch was considerable for sure. But from there, they were really impressed with how uniform, for the most part, the API solution has been across different services and across markets, and the way that the data dictionary is just kind of baked into the API in a way that it's not really, but RETS still has really increased their conversion times overall. So knowing that we're moving there as an industry, don't be scared. I think it's time to take the leap. I think we've all decided on this API thing is the way to go. We've had a few conferences about this now, so I'd say don't be scared. And we've got a really awesome team at Bridge, and I know CoreLogic does too, to help you make that leap. So just reach out and we'll be ready to help you.
Thanks, Kristin. So before I open it up to questions, we have about 5 minutes left. I just wanted to see if there was anything that Andrew or Warren wanted to add. We're good? All right, so we have about 5 minutes for questions. If anyone has any for me or any of the panelists right here up front.
Mostly for Amy, but generally, asset managers.
I think it's a fair question. There's a little more resistance for the very obvious reason that I think most of the energy has gone into residential right now, right? It was the biggest chunk of listings in most MLSs. I think the standard's good. I mean, we have some vendors that are taking all classes via data dictionary. But we have some larger ones that are definitely resistant, right? They've got their own translation that they've done, and I think getting those folks involved, the people from apartments.com, getting them involved in the data dictionary would be a good solution, because ultimately standards make sense. And if you all are spending money mapping data, that's a waste of money. Your money could be better spent on much better innovation. And so to me, residential was the first big chunk. And now we probably need to invest some more time in some of those additional classes, the multifamily. And even, I think this example came up yesterday somewhere, they realized that farm and ranch had to become farm and ranch because those weren't the same things, right? And so I'm sure there's plenty more lessons learned that we need to, just engage that community to flesh out that data dictionary in the same way we have residential. Just my opinion. Rob Larson probably has more to add to that.
Any other questions? Miss Julie. Yeah, so our time frame, we started probably in the third quarter of 2017, and we rolled it out into production April 25th of 2018. So I would have given it more time if that were up to me. I think a solid year is comfortable. I think too with CoreLogic, we were the first one to do this.
Yep.
I'm sure they have only gotten better and more efficient, and not that efficiency was a problem, but
No, I think we've definitely gotten better. And to me, it all depends on how many fields you're trying to save, right?
Yeah.
The more you're willing to sacrifice, the quicker it can go, the bigger impact to your end users. And so, understanding the fields, how they're being used, what's going to happen to them, how many displays they're on,
Yeah.
things like that.
how many searches
How many
include
searches,
those fields?
How many people
Yeah.
are using those fields in searches? So spending your time up front on that homework helps you decide kind of how much time you should spend trying to save that field. Because ultimately,
Yeah.
fields will be sacrificed.
They will, and they will be moved.
Yeah.
I think we had about 200, just shy of 250 metadata changes with ours. It was big. We We treated it a little bit differently, where even if we were changing a label in the database, if it was still intuitive to maintain the existing label for the user interface, then we would keep it the way that it was, because we knew that there was a certain amount of changes that would have to take place and were going to be visible. So those that we didn't have to make look different, we kept those the same. So there's different approaches you can take. I actually, going into it, I wanted to chunk it up into several quarterly changes. And instead, we did it all at one time. And there are some lessons learned. I'm happy to share those with anyone who might be interested. But at the end of the day, it's certainly worth it. It led to us being able to have these conversations up here, which is just seeing everything come to fruition. It's super exciting.
And I think from a data consumer's perspective, a quarterly sounds better, like small chunks that we can teach the agents how to consume more easily. But from a data consumer's perspective, most people don't want to do 4, right? 4 data conversions in a year. So
I'll speak for Warren.
Speaking for the folks up here.
Rip the Band-Aid off all at once.
So I think it's a rip the Band-Aid thing off. And I think it really is like, if you can't think about a data conversion, think about starting to not make the problem worse when you're adding fields. Think about just looking at the data dictionary when you're getting a request for a new field and seeing if you can at least make that data dictionary compliant.
Be involved with the data dictionary work group. I wish I was more involved today, but at the time I was a lot more involved, and I knew what was coming out of the group. We were able to map to the 1.7 spec before the 1.7 spec was actually ratified, and working with Rob Larson and working with Greg made it a whole lot easier. So thank you guys for making this possible, and with that, we are out of time. So thank you everyone very much. Thank you.
Thank you.